All right, so when you did factoring in Algebra 1, you've probably only been exposed to some basic type of factoring, okay? So you're normally given a trinomial. Before we look at this, we're going to think about, let's think about x squared plus 5 plus 6x, something like this. You don't have to write this down, okay? You can just pay attention with me. So when you were factoring a trinomial, do you guys remember writing out two parentheses like this? And then how would you start the parentheses? You're really just unfoiling. Does this ring a bell? So how would you start off these two parentheses? Yeah, so you ask yourself, what do you multiply to get x squared? It would be x times x. That will give you x squared. And then these two numbers would have to multiply to what? You have to multiply to, not 30. 5. Yep, multiply to the last number. So this one's pretty nice because what are the only things that multiply to 5? 1 and 5. I made what's called a T-chart here. We're going to do that today. And then if this is positive, it'll be plus and plus. So it'll be 5 and 1. Okay, and then if you FOIL, x times x is x squared. This would be 1x. This would be 5x. So when you add those together, you get 6x. And then 1 times 5 is going to be 5. Okay, today we're going to be doing some that are like this, but a lot of them are going to be more intensive. So let's talk about those rules. So one thing that you may have briefly done last year is taking out a factor. And that is the first thing that you want to look for when you are factoring. Okay, so in this example, they gave you 9x squared plus 27x. Okay, and then you need to look for common numbers and common variables. So you have to look for both numbers and variables here. So between 9 and 27, you want to take out the largest factor that goes into both. Okay, which of course you can see here that 9 is the biggest one that goes into 9 and 27. And then x goes into both, so you would take that out. When you take something out, you are dividing it, okay? So when you take out the 9x, you are left with x plus 3 inside, and you can always check that with FOIL. Okay, so when you are checking that, 9x times x is 9x squared, 9x times 3 is 27x. We are going to try this as well, okay, with 16x cubed y minus 28x squared y squared. We'll keep our comments to ourselves for now, and let me show you how to do it. Okay, so when you are looking for common numbers, what you're going to do is look at these two values and ask yourself, what is the biggest number that goes into 16 and 28? What I would do is I would look at just the numbers first, 16 and 28. What are numbers that go into 16? 4, okay, and 4 goes into 28. Okay, is there a bigger one? 8. Does 8 go into 28? Nope. Okay, and then 16, and 16 doesn't go into 28 evenly. So the biggest number that goes into both is 4. Great. Okay, now we're going to look at the x's. Here I have x cubed, here I have x squared. So x squared only has 2 x's to give. This one has 3. When you are taking out a variable, it can't be bigger than the smallest exponent. Okay, so I couldn't take out x cubed because it wouldn't be able to come out of x squared. Okay, and then the last one are the y's. So this is y and this is y squared. Okay, so you can take a y out of both of them. Once you take out your GCF, I want you to make your parentheses, and then what you're going to do is divide. Okay, so the first thing I want you to do is just divide the numbers. So 16 divided by 4, write that down. Okay, then we're going to do the x's. X cubed divided by x squared. Write that down. Okay, what happens when you do y divided by y? What's anything divided by itself? It's just 1, right? It cancels out. Okay, so you won't have to write down the 1. Okay, so let's see if you did that right. What you should have is just 4x. Okay, so 16 divided by 4 is 4. X cubed divided by x squared is x. Y divided by y cancels out, makes 1. We don't have to write that down. Now, if this is a positive and this is a negative, it will stay negative. You can also just divide. Negative 28 divided by 4 is going to be negative what? Negative 7. Okay, x squared divided by itself cancels, so we don't have to worry about it. And then y squared divided by y is what? What's y squared divided by y? Y. Okay, once you get that, let's check it with distribution. And this is a more difficult example, absolutely. We need exposure to both of them. Okay, so when you multiply 4 times 4, 16. X squared times x, x cubed. Y doesn't have anything to be multiplied by, so it stays y. 4 times negative 7, negative 28. X squared, nothing to multiply by, it stays. Y times y, y squared. So if you were to take out the x cubed, when you got here, you wouldn't be able to take it out because you only have 2 of them. Yep, so you can only take out the smallest amount. And this is how you would write your final answer. So your final answer is just going to have a value in front, okay, multiplied by 4x minus 7y. Okay, then the next thing we want to look for is a pattern. Sometimes you have one, okay? A lot of times you don't, but there are some special patterns that we need to be aware of. And the most popular one is going to be the difference of 2 squares. Now pay attention to the name. Difference means that's what you get when you do what? Yep. The difference is what you get when you subtract. Okay, and then if you look at these numbers, the 9x squared and the 64, those are both what? Perfect squares. Okay, so when you have this, you're going to be looking for the perfect squares. So the difference of 2 squares means these are perfect squares. When you take the square root, you get a whole number. Okay, and I'm going to show you what the pattern is, and then we're going to look at it with this example. Okay, so the pattern, and this is the only one you'll have to memorize. Again, you're going to know it, so it's not like you're going to practice it enough that you're going to have no choice but to memorize it. You will memorize it against your will. So a plus b times a minus b. So if you have a square minus another square, it factors into a plus b times a minus b. Doesn't matter the order that you put those in. Okay, so the a and the b are different values. If you take the square root of a squared, what do you get? A. If you take the square root of b squared, what do you get? B. Okay, so if we look at that with this example, if you were to take the square root of 9x squared, you can think of these separately. What's the square root of 9? 3. The square root of x squared. Yep, so this is going to be your A value, and then you have 64. Okay, so the square root of 64 is 8. And then I want you to look and see how we put those together. Okay, and see this one has the minus first, it doesn't matter. Okay, I always like to do the positive first. So 3x minus 8, 3x plus 8, or 3x plus 8 times 3x minus 8. Again, you can always check this with FOIL. So if you do 3x times 3x, you'll get 9x squared. Okay, and I usually just write this below. And then what happens here is you end up with a negative 24x and a positive 24x. So that's going to make 0. We aren't even going to have to write that down. And then negative 8 and positive 8 is going to be negative 64. And so this makes 9x squared minus 64. Okay, so we're going to be using a lot of FOIL today. Okay. And then we're going to do the perfect square trinomial. I'm going to make sure those were all plugged in after school. Yeah. Okay. And I'll get the things off of it. Okay. Do you want me to bring it down to the counseling office? Or? Okay. Okay. All right. And then the perfect square trinomial. This is something that you don't have to memorize. It is helpful to know it because this does happen, but I feel like you can always get to a perfect square trinomial just by knowing how to factor. So it's not going to be something that you memorize necessarily. Okay, but similar to this one, see how we have 16x squared? Okay, if you take the square root of that, of the 16x squared, we're going to get 4x. And if you take the square root of 25, you're going to get 5. Okay, so there are two of these. There's one that is addition. Okay, and there's one that is subtraction. Okay, and then when you are checking those with FOIL, you are going to make sure that they add up to that middle number. When you are checking, just remember that the last two numbers have to multiply to a value. And if you have a positive number, when you are multiplying numbers together, they can both be positive or they can both be what? When you multiply, a positive times a positive is a positive. What else is going to be positive? What happens if you multiply a negative by a positive? What is that result? Negative. Okay, and then if you multiply a negative times a negative, that is a positive. Okay, so for addition, okay, for this to work out, you have a squared plus, see how this is 40? What's 4 times 5? 20. So this is double that, and that pattern always works. If you multiply these together and double it, that's the middle, plus b squared. Okay, and then you end up with a plus b times a plus b, which you can write as a plus b squared. Okay, now the reason why I say you don't have to memorize these is because if you were to factor this, you could find out 4 times 4x, 4x times 4x is 16x squared. If this is a positive here but a negative, both of these have to be negatives. And then a 5 and a 5. Okay, if you were to do that, you'd get negative 20x and negative 20x, which of course would multiply to negative 40. And 4x minus 5 times 4x minus 5 can be written as 4x minus 5 squared. Okay, it does not matter to me whether you write your answer like this, 4x minus 5 times 4x minus 5, or if you write it squared. Okay, both of them, full credit. Okay, if you notice they're the same, you can write it as a power. Okay. All right, we're going to talk about 3A, and then we're going to come back to the last one. So this is the one that you guys are used to doing, or that you've seen, at least seen before, even if it takes a minute for it to come back to you. Okay, so this says to use the question. The question is, what multiplies to 30? What multiplies to get the last number? Okay, and adds to get the middle number. All right, now this one is done for you, but don't worry, we're going to do plenty of practice where you get to do it. So if you want to know what numbers multiply to 30, okay, I recommend making a T-chart of all of the multiples. You're not going to have to do that every time. It's just going to be ones where you need a visual so that you can see all of your options. So 1 times 30, 2 times 15, 3 times 10, 5 times 6, and then because 6 is on this side, you know there's no more. Okay, so it's plus and plus. Okay, so 2 and 15, that's going to add to 17. Okay, so again, you're just checking that with FOIL. Okay, so this is your answer here. Okay, so x times x is x squared. The middle adds up to 17x. 2 times 15 is going to be positive 30. Okay, and we're going to come back to the last one because this is something that is optional. Okay, this method is going to be optional, deciding if you would like to use it. All right, so the rules of factoring. Sorry, did I do that too fast? You guys need another minute on the last page? Or are we okay? Yeah, 3B, we're going to come back to that. Okay. All right, so the rules of factoring, I always like to joke so that you guys remember that the rules of factoring are like the rules of dating. So when you meet somebody, you want to go out with them, you might want to find out something that you guys have in common. Okay, in math, those are our common factors, which is called the GCF. Okay, so that's that golden rule. Remember, when you're looking for the GCF, this includes numbers and variables. Sometimes the GCF is just a number. Sometimes the number is just a variable. Other times it's both. Okay, so you have to find that out depending on the situation. Okay, the next thing you want to do is see if there's something special about them. Right? Maybe if you know what music they like, you burn them a CD. Oh wait, that was the 2000s. What do you guys do? Make them a Spotify playlist? That'd be cute. All right, and then the only special pattern that you really need to know is the difference of two squares. Okay, so when you have the difference of two perfect squares, splitting that up into the addition and the subtraction factors, that's the one that you're going to have to know. All right, and sometimes, ladies, we just got to guess and check it out. Am I right? Am I wrong? Give them a chance. Okay, and then we are going to FOIL this back. So when you make a guess, make sure that you check it out with FOIL. Okay, first, outer, inner, last. Multiply it back. It should multiply back to the polynomial. Okay, now that I've embarrassed you all with my factoring rules, let's practice. So a couple things that we should remember from before is that you always multiply to get to the last number. And when you multiply to get to that last number, if the last number is positive, Okay, so we're going to say if the product, uh-oh, getting low on the screen here. Okay, so if the product is positive, okay, then you have the same signs. They're either both positive or both negative, because a positive times a positive is a positive result. A negative times a negative is also a positive result. But if the product is negative, so if that last number is negative, then the signs are opposite. So one has to be plus, one has to be minus, because the only way to get a product that's a negative is to have one that's plus and one that's minus. Okay, and then once you do those, you are trying to add or subtract to get to the middle number. And the reason why I say you add or subtract is because if you have opposite signs, you are going to be subtracting. Okay, the most important thing, you can always check with FOIL to make sure that you have that right factorization. Okay, if you check, if you do that first, inner, outer, last, okay, it should FOIL back to that polynomial. Okay, so the instructions are just going to say factor the expression. And it's going to be up to you to remember the 1, 2, 3. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is see if they have anything in common. So it's 6 and 15. Those are our numbers. What's the number that goes into both? 3. Is there a number bigger than 3? No, because 6 doesn't go into 15. Okay, so I can take out a 3. Let's check the variables. X squared and x. Can I take something out? Yeah, I can take out. Okay. And then I want you to write what goes inside there, and I want you to start part B for me as well. So once you put that, once you have that, I want you to check it by distributing. Okay, so inside the parentheses, can you tell me what you got for that? Great. Okay, let's check it. Let's make sure. Okay, so 3x times 2x. 3 times 2 is 6. X times x squared. Great. 3 times -5, -15. I only have one x and nothing to multiply by, so that is awesome. Once you have this, okay, you should always keep the GCF in front. So will you just write a little note that the GCF stays in front? Okay, because sometimes we're going to have a GCF and we're going to factor. This one, you can't do anything else besides take out the GCF. If you do have a GCF, it has to go into everything. So 10 and 16, I could take a 2 out, but what is this number in front here? A 1. So can you take a 2 out of 1? No. Okay, so there's no GCF. Okay, for a special pattern, we're going to see if there's any perfect squares. Like I said, the main one you need to look for is the difference of two squares. And anytime you have the difference of two squares, it's a binomial. It's a squared minus b squared. Okay, this is not a binomial, it's a trinomial because there's 1, 2, 3 terms. Okay, so it's not going to be the difference of two squares. So we are going to guess and check. Okay, so to start the parentheses, the two starting values have to multiply to x squared. So x times x is going to be x squared. That's how we're going to start. Okay, and then the last number is positive, but this is negative. So if it's positive, they're the same signs. If this one is minus, that means both of these are negative. That's the only way to add to a negative here. Okay, and then Hayden, I'm going to have you help me make my T-chart with 16. So tell me some numbers that multiply to 16. Hayden's going to help me. Yep, 8 and 2. What else? I always start with 1. Okay, 4 and 4. And then 1 and, yes. Okay, all right, so we have to pick out the two that are going to add to 10, which is, of course, what? 2 and 8. Doesn't matter what order you put this in. You can have x minus 2 times x minus 8, or you can have x minus 8 times x minus 2, and then we'll just check this with FOIL. X times x, x squared, negative 2x, negative 8x is negative 10x. A negative times a negative is a positive. Yay, we did it. Okay, so when you're doing that check, you can do the check in your head, or if you're a visual person and you want to write it out and see, that is fine too. Okay, and then for part C, I want you to do the first two steps. So, is there a GCF? No. Okay, is it a difference of two squares? No. Okay, so we're going to guess and check. Now that 2 ends up throwing people off, but don't be afraid of the 2. You know why 2 is cool? It's not because it's better than 1. It's because it's prime, right? 2 is a prime number. Do we remember what that means? The only thing that multiplies to 2 is what? 2 and 1. So we know that it has to start like this. 2x and x or x and 2x. Okay, I'm going to do another T-chart for 12. So 1 times 12, 2 times 6, 3 times 4. Those are the factors of 12. Okay, what's different about this is when you put those in there, you are going to have to actually FOIL it back because whatever you put here gets multiplied by 2. Okay, so we're going to do some guessing and checking. So I'm going to use a pencil because sometimes I guess and check and I might have to erase. I'm trying to get to 5. Okay, so maybe I try 6 and 2. If it's a negative, do you guys remember what signs you have? If it's a negative, one has to be plus, one has to be minus. I usually just throw them in there and then check. So this would be 6 minus 4x. Is that going to be 5? No. Okay, so then let's try something else. I would just erase, just so you can see in your notes, like, hey, we're checking some things that aren't going to work out. We can do that. Okay, so I'm trying to get to 5, so maybe I'm going to try the 3 and 4. So if I put 4 here, I can make that a negative, and again, I just put in the signs and then I change if I need to. So here I have 3x and negative 8x. That's going to be negative 5. So I'm actually really close. What's the only thing I have to change? Yeah, the signs. If I make this a minus, this becomes negative 3. If I make this a plus, this becomes positive 8x. Okay, so then this is going to be my final answer. 2x minus 3 times x plus 4. It's okay to plug it in and check and have to do that several times before you find your answer. Okay, it's like a puzzle. You have to solve it, you have to try some things, okay? So don't get discouraged if you don't get it right away. Some of these are going to be difficult and you're going to have to do some checking. All right, now for part D, there's no GCF, nothing I can take out of both, but I do have a difference. Is x squared a perfect square? Yeah, what's the square root of x squared? X. What's the square root of 9? 3. So then you can just factor this into x plus 3 times x minus 3. Really, those are my favorite, the difference of the two squares. Maybe someday they'll become your favorite too. The difference of two squares. So that is your special pattern. Okay? The order of any of these does not matter. You could have x minus 8 times x minus 2. You could have x plus 4 times 2x minus 3. You can have x minus 3 times x plus 3. Okay, now if you've already tried E and you didn't do the exact same way I'm going to show you, that's fine. Because there's this negative in front, there are all multiple ways to do this. I recommend factoring out a negative 1 because I think that's easier. Okay, so if you factor out a negative 1, okay, what that does is it makes it x squared plus x minus 72. Because if you were to distribute, then you get negative, negative, positive. And then you only have to worry about factoring with the positive x squared and not the negative. Okay, you can also write negative 1 as just a negative. That doesn't matter. And then if you're trying to multiply to get a negative, you know your signs have to be opposites. So I like to put those in as well. Okay, and then when you're thinking of 72, do the what two numbers come to mind first? Yeah, I would think most of you would think 9 and 8, right? Okay, and is the difference between 9 and 8 1? Yeah, so you have to have a positive 9 and a negative 8. So 9 minus 8 is going to be 1. 9 times negative 8 is negative 72. X times x is x squared. We keep the negative out in front. Okay, you can always do your t-chart to find other factors if it wasn't 1, okay, because any of these combinations is possible. I know that 3 days is 72 hours, so it's 3 times 24. And then you could just keep going in order. I always do it in order so that I don't miss any. Okay, but as soon as you find yours, you don't have to do this every time. I just want to show you how to create that chart. Okay, now if you are like, well, I don't need to factor out the negative 1, I can just do it by starting mine off like negative x and x. Yes, you can. Okay, so this would be an alternate answer. You could have negative x minus 9 times x minus 8. Negative x times x is negative x squared. This would be negative 9 plus 8, which would be negative x. And then a negative times a negative would be a positive. That would be fine. Or there's one more equivalent, which would be x plus 9 and negative x plus 8. So whichever way you want to do that one works. Okay, all of these would be considered correct answers. All right, why don't you guys give F a try? No, we're not saying that. looks like we're doing that one pretty well. So there's no GCF, right? Okay, there's not the difference of two squares, so I said you don't have to worry about the other patterns, they'll take care of themselves. But then you're trying to multiply 2. What are we trying to multiply 2 in this one? 25. Okay, so the only things that make 25 are 25 and 1 and what? 5 and 5. So we're going to start it with x and x. If this is a positive and this is a positive, both of your signs should be positive. Okay, and you can write your answer one of two ways. You can write it as x plus 5 times x plus 5, or you can write it as x plus 5 squared. Okay, again, I'll accept either one of those answers, okay? All right, now we're going to get into some that have multiple choices. So for G, you have 12x squared plus 44x minus 45. When you're dealing with bigger numbers like this, it is very important that we make sure there's no GCF. Okay, so like 2 goes into these, but not into 45. And really, just check the factors of 12, because that's the smallest number. Okay, so 2, no. 3 goes in here, not going to go into 44, does go into 45. 4 is going to go into these two, not 45. 6 goes into here, isn't going to go into the other two. Okay, so if 6 doesn't go in there, 12 is not going to go in there either. So there's no GCF. We don't have the perfect squares, which means we get to guess and check this. And when you're doing that, 12 is going to make this a little more difficult. So let's talk about our possible solutions. Okay, when you are starting, up until this point, we always knew what we were going to start our parentheses with, but now we've got some options. And that's because multiple numbers multiply to 12. So I can multiply 12x by 1x to get 12x squared, or I can multiply 4x by 3x to get 12x squared. Oh, sorry, I wanted to do them in order, but 6 and 2 are also going to work. So this is a situation where I find it helpful to do the T-chart, because for 45, we want to know what our options are. So 1 and 45, 2 no, 3 and 15, 4 no, 5 goes in there how many times? 9. Okay, so we need to do some guessing and checking here. Okay, so let's use a pencil. We're trying to add to 44. Okay, if you have a negative here, you know that the signs are opposite. Okay, so I'm going to give you some time now to guess and check. If you would rather like write this on a scrap piece of paper, that's fine, or we're just going to use a pencil. Okay, so let's look at the first one. I'm going to put mine in a scrap sheet of paper. Okay, so if I'm doing 12x times x, okay, these are my options. If I put 45 here, I'm going to have to multiply 45 times 12. Okay, that is not going to add up to 44. That's going to be way bigger. So I know that's not going to work. If I did 45 here and 1 here, and again, I'll just throw in a plus and minus, then I have 45x minus 12x. Okay, so again, I can see I'm not going to get 44. I get 33. So I could try 3 and 15. Again, 15 here is too big. So if I put 15 and 3, I can see this is going to be 36 and 15. Hey, that is not going to add to or subtract to 44 because you have to do opposites. Okay, the last one with that would be the 12 and the 9, or the 5 and the 9. So if I put 5 here, it would be 60. And then if I subtract 9, I'd have 51. So that wouldn't work. And if I put the 9 here, that's going to be way too big. So I know that it's not going to be the 12x and x. All right, so then let's try the 4x and the 3x. There's nothing that was going to add up to 44. Yeah, so that's not going to work. Doesn't work. Again, here, 45 times 4, that is going to be very large, so I'm not even going to waste my time with that. Okay, the 15 and 3, this is going to be 60. This is 9, so if I subtracted those, I'm 51, which is somewhere in the ballpark, but it's not it. Okay, so I'm going to do 4x and 3x. Okay, if I do 9 here and 5 here, this is 36. This is 15. Those are not going to subtract to make 44. And because 4 is the bigger number, you really don't even have to worry about switching them because then they just get smaller. This would be 20 and 27. So some of that you can do in your head. Okay, let's try 4x and 3x with 9 and, I just did it with the 9 and the 5. And I did the 15 times 3. So, nope, those don't work either. All right, so then let's go to 6x and 2x. Again, we're not going to do the 45 here because that's way too big. Even here, this would be 90. So, nope, let's just go to the 15. This would be 30 and 18. Not going to work. Okay, let's try the 9 and the 5. So here I have 10x, here I have 54x. If I subtract this, if this is negative and this is positive, that's going to make 44. So to make this negative, this will be minus, this will be plus, and that's going to be your answer. Okay, but see, it took kind of a lot to get there. Really, if I wrote them out in order, it wouldn't have taken me as much time. Okay, so then this is going to be your final answer. And sometimes we just have to go through that check-in, guess and check process, which can be frustrating because you are like guessing and checking, which is why there is another option for ones like this. I'm going to show you how to do it, and then we'll talk about why I think guessing and checking is actually better for this case. Okay, but there is a way that you can break up the middle term and do grouping. Okay, this is never anything you'll have to do. You can always do guessing and checking. This is just another way to do that, and I call it the house method. So factoring a trinomial back into two binomials, that was guessing and checking. You can always guess and check, okay? You can always guess and check with FOIL. You don't have to use this house method that I'm going to show you. I call it the house method because when I was taught this, my teacher would make a little house. And so that's what we're going to do. Okay, so what you can do is you can multiply the first and the last numbers together. So we're going to do it with the 4x squared plus 25x minus 21. Okay, and some people like this because it takes the guessing out, which is why I'm going to show you how to do it. And then when you multiply, you get negative 84. Okay, in the chimney of the house is where I make my little T-chart for 84. So you are trying to find two values that multiply to negative 84, and it is going to add to get 25. So if it multiplies to get negative 84, you can just write down the positive, and you can find the subtraction. So I always start with number 1. Okay, 1 and 84. If I subtract those, the difference is 83. I'm looking for the difference of 25, so that's not going to work. Yep, so we'll go with 2 and 42. The difference of that is 40. Again, I'm looking for 25. Yep, we know it does, because what's 8 plus 4? 8 plus 4 is 12. Okay, how many times does 3 go into 8? 2 times, because 3 times 2 is 6. How many times does 3 go into 24? 8 times, so 3 times 28 is 84. Okay, if I subtract those, do I get 25? Yes, the difference is 25. And we're doing the difference because it's negative. Okay, so if I make this a negative 3 and a positive 28, the difference is going to be 25. So this is how we would write that. Okay, the sides of the house drop, they stay the same. And we're going to write 25x as the sum of 28 and negative 3. And we're going to drop the other side of the house. Okay, and then we're going to really just the equal sign or the same steps that we're writing here. So this is 4x squared, 28 minus 3. Okay, so remember, 28 minus 3 is 25. We're just rewriting that. Okay, so we are going to group together, and we are going to take out the GCF. Okay, and that's what it says here. You're going to group into 2's and factor the GCF out. Okay, so when you do that, this is 4x squared and 28x. What number goes into both? 4 and an x. So when you take that out, you'll get x plus 7. 4x times x is 4x squared, 4x times 7, 28x. Now here, you want to take out negative 3, because in order for this to work, you have to have these be the same. Okay, so you take out the 4x, you get x plus 7. You take out the negative 3, you get x plus 7. Okay, and then what you do in the next step, and this can be tricky at first, is you factor out the x plus 7. So when you take something out, when you factor it out, you divide by it. So if you were to take out the x minus 7 here, you would get 4x. If you were to take out the negative 3, you would have that. And this is going to be your factorization. Okay, sometimes people write it as, oh, I'm dividing out the x plus 7. So again, I'm left with this 4x minus 3. And then you can just rewrite it. You generally have the larger coefficient first. But let's make sure this is right. Let's check this. So negative 3 plus 28x adds to 25. That's the middle. 4x times x is 4x squared. Negative 3 times 7, negative 21. We did it. Okay, so that's just another tool for you to use if you would like it. Okay. All right, and then the last thing we're going to do is part H. Okay, and then I want you to take out the GCF. There is a GCF here. All right, so again, look at the smallest number. The smallest number is 8. Okay, so does 8 go into 18? No. Does 4 go into 18? No. Does 2 go into 18? Yes. Okay, so take out the 2. Once you take out the 2, you should have a trinomial left. We are going to factor that trinomial. Okay, so then when you take out 2, you also have to take out the x squared. So you have 9x to the second minus 37x plus 4. Okay, and then you have 2 options here. Okay, to get 9x squared, you can either do 9x and x or 3x and 3x. The nice thing is it just has to multiply to 4. Okay, so it's either 1 and 4 or 2 and 2. Now, because this is a minus, we know both of these are negatives. We're trying to get 37. The largest number I have is 4. If I plug 4 in here, I can only get a 12 and a 6. Is that going to add to 37? No. So I'm going to try this, because what's 4 times 9? 36. So 36 minus 1, is that negative 37? Yep. 9x times x is 9x squared. Okay, and then negative times a negative is going to be a positive. All right, you do have homework tonight. If I give you things to pass down the road, will you make sure you pass them down? Okay, we're going to do this worksheet. Okay, and this is what is due in Google Classroom tomorrow. What? Yeah, yep, at 7:40, just like normal. Okay, you do need to try all the questions, except there are 2 that say to skip it.